Now, yeah, here we go. Maybe the battery? I don't know. Yeah, okay. We'll see how it works. Felix, in our lesson from Acts this morning, is the governor of the province of Judea. He was appointed by the Roman Emperor Claudius, probably in about AD 52, and Claudius was the man on the hot seat, as you might say, trying to figure out what to do with the Apostle Paul. Paul had been in danger of losing his life to a mob threatened by his teachings, considered to be in violation of Jewish laws and customs. They also thought him to be the ringleader of the early Christian sect called the Nazarenes. All of this combined, Paul had to be transported to a safe haven in Caesarea, out of reach of the out-of-control mob, where he stood trial before the cruel and corrupt Governor Felix. But what was most interesting about the exchange between Paul and Felix was Felix's curiosity about what Paul had to say. Paul initially said in the 10th verse of the 24th chapter of Acts, "I cheerfully make my defense." Now, not a bad attitude for a man who was almost lynched by his own brethren and now stood before a twisted, not to be trusted emperor's appointee whose only interest was propping up his own privileges. But judging from the overall spirit of the passage, Felix was impressed by Paul's cheerful and irrefutable defense, and therefore ordered him safeguarded, giving him some freedom until his second hearing. But the moral of the story is that Felix fell short of taking the next step to turn his life around. The passage indicates that he was almost at the dock where he could have pulled himself out of the waters in which he was slowly drowning himself, both morally and spiritually. The waters of self-centeredness and contempt for anybody who didn't serve his own interest. Now, contrast that attitude to Paul's. He testified before Felix, "I do my best to maintain a blameless conscience both before God and before men." Now, one can almost sense that Felix, Governor Felix, is ready for a revelation to reform his ways and to take to heart the powerful words of Paul. But the only thing he does is procrastinate, and he keeps Paul imprisoned. Felix told Paul, "I will call you again. I will call you again when I get a chance." How many times have you and I said that to others, but have never followed through? "I will call you when I get a chance. Tomorrow I'll contact you. Tomorrow I will help you. Or tomorrow I will change my ways." But before we know it, it's too late. Tomorrow never comes. I said last Sunday that these last few Sundays that I serve as your pastor, I'd like to share several key components, I think, of the scriptures and how I feel they can positively shape how you view yourself and how you view others and how you view the world. There's a parable in the Bible that's entitled "The Master and Servant" in the Gospel of Luke. This parable has a surprising twist to it. Their master expects his servants to be ready when he comes home. And if he finds them ready and on the alert and prepared to serve immediately, he will reverse the tables and he will wait on them. Readiness is the key word here. But Jesus expands the nuanced parable when he says, "We do not know the time of the second coming, but the important thing is to be ready and prepared for its return, waiting no longer to do the good of the kingdom, but by doing as much good as you can before the clock runs out. Luke tells us, the Son of Man is coming at an hour that you do not expect, meaning the final judgment. In other words, don't put off demonstrating your faith through actions and not just through words. The same parable has more drama to it than meets the eye, meaning the clock is ticking on all of our lives, and the things we keep putting off may end up in the forever lost category because the second chance may never come. In other words, Jesus is saying, who is going to minister in my name before it's too late? Jesus makes a couple points here. God does judge our behavior here on earth. And we do not know when that judgment will ultimately come because we don't know the extent of our lives. Secondly, each and everyone's life is allowed only so many ticks of the clock. We've always known that. And finally, the opportunity to reach out to someone in the form of loving and helping and going out of your way to lend a hand may never present itself again in the same shape or form. The title of this sermon, Previous Play Not Under Review, is obviously a takeoff from the reviews of college and NFL football plays that routinely take place. Most of you know how it goes. If a coach wishes to challenge the call of an official on a reviewable play, he can do so. And as we know, it can make the difference in the outcome of the game. As we K-State fans years ago, in 2011 I think, when the play was reversed during the Miami football game, Miami's touchdown call was reversed and giving K-State the victory. We like those kind of reviews. But life doesn't always have that liberty to reverse what has already taken place or hasn't taken place. A lot of the things that we do or say or don't do or say can be reviewed only in our own minds. Many times we find out with regrets and with the haunting knowledge that the outcome is irreversible. Years ago, my son was preparing himself for an interview for his first real job after graduation from college. A couple days before the interview, he and I had a good conversation on the phone, and we're discussing how he could put his best foot forward in an interview and how he needed to adequately prepare for that 30-minute meeting. We talked about several other things relevant to the short time he would be in that office that day, and we both knew, of course, that this was it. This would be his one shot at the job that he really wanted. In other words, after the call is made, the previous play won't be under review. There won't be another chance. How many times have you said to yourself, I wish I had prepared better for an interview, or I wish I had done better on that project, or been better in that meeting or in a game in which you were playing, but you didn't, and you knew it was too late to do anything about it. It was over. You couldn't push the reset button. When it comes to personal relationships, the decisions to not act in the way that our Lord intends us to act becomes even more critical. Like when the first frost comes and what we have left outside is no longer, there are seasons of our relationships that can never be recovered or reconciled. The door was open. Now the door is closed. We know that our Lord has always commanded us, for instance, to forgive and to rebuild our relationships, not refuse to forgive and rebuild them. And when we don't seize that right time to reconcile and rebuild, the opportunity could be lost forever. I have known family members who have refused to reconcile with other family members, and before they know it, one of them has passed away. Then it was too late. The door closed on one of the most important chapters of life. Previous play, not under review. We know that life can end suddenly and abruptly, and there's never any better time than now to reach out, to help, to restore, to reconcile. Wall Street Journal ran a couple of articles several years ago that dealt with the brevity of life and how quickly things can change. One of them told the story of a 15-year-old Japanese baseball star, Ryusuke Yoshida, who lost his father in the tsunami that struck Japan in 2011. His father, in trying to save others, was dragged away by the swirling waters and was never seen again. His son said, "My dad always used to give me advice on baseball and what to do next. I don't have that anymore. I think that's what I miss the most." Another story of how those closest to you can quickly be taken from you. We need to do all we can today. The other article featured, we have mentioned this before, pictures of Steve Jobs, who I mentioned just a couple weeks ago, and his biological father side by side on the front page. And the title of the article was, "For Jobs' Biological Father, the Reunion Never Came." The father, John Jindali, who discovered he was Steve Jobs' father in 2005, indicated to his friends that the estrangement between the two was something he regretted and wished that he had made different decisions, or wished there was a different result. But then it was too late. His son had already passed away. You know, we can wish all we want, but the way to get results in life is to pay attention to what the Gospels teach us to do. They teach us to reconcile. They teach us to understand. They teach us to be patient. They teach us to help. They teach us to forgive and to not wait to do all these things. A lot of the relationship issues would disappear if both sides practice the simple prescriptions of the Scriptures. The Gospels also teach us that time is of the essence. While the curtain continues to come down on our life here on earth and the clock ticks away its irrecoverable seconds, it becomes even more urgent to respond to the things that we need to take care of. Not only is it important for us to pay attention to the things and the people we have neglected and the relationships that need to be restored, we need to take care of the opportunities to go out of our way to help others. When Jesus called the fishermen, Peter, Andrew, James, and John, to be his disciples, he did not ask his disciples to follow him tomorrow. He asked them to follow him today. And if those 4 fishermen hadn't responded immediately along the shores of Galilee, we may have never heard of them, because that was their time to go. And they went. The writer in Ecclesiastes tells us, "There is an appointed time for everything, and there's a time for every event under heaven." But life has a way of handing out the fact that the previous play is not under review. So it is important to act swiftly in regard to our relationships and in matters of serving others. God is calling you to love and to respond to his call to rebuild, restore, and to help, not tomorrow, but today. Presbyterian minister Dr. Morgan Roberts, who has been in our pulpit a couple of times, talks about the judgment of our life that we will all receive at the final judgment. He likes to call it the final performance review. At the final judgment, he says, we're not confronted with a long checklist of the bad things we did, but instead with a list of the good things that we didn't do but could have done. This picture of a judgment focuses not on the sins of commission, but upon the sins of omission, particularly the sin of withholding what we could have shared. Dr. Roberts goes on to say that how the American theologian Paul Tillich's notion that finally, at the end of our earthly life, we will get to meet all those whom we either helped or hurt, and how our initial impact had a domino effect, touching other lives across many miles and many years. It's as if we will meet a long receiving line of those we helped or hurt. It's sort of like the idea in Matthew in which Jesus utters those striking words, "Inasmuch as you did it to one of the least of my brethren, you did it to me." He goes on to say, and upon our arrival at the other side, God will simply say to us, "Here are some people who would like to see you." And there will be a long line of those in whose lives we have made a difference. As the line passes by some will say, "Thank you." Others will say, "I forgive you." Perhaps because we didn't do what we could have done. He goes on to say, the big surprise, however, will be that of the ever-increasing impact that our life has had on so many people, how something we said or did or a gift we gave made a vastly larger difference than we could have ever imagined. The most amazing surprises, he said, on this day of judgment will be that our life has accomplished so much more than we could have ever realized. Perhaps heaven will be a place where we will be about surprised by joy, forever saying to ourselves, "Why didn't I do more?"